Alright, so let's start off. So first thing we're going to do is import the tk. So what we type is from tk enter import and a star. So this imports the entire tk enter package or library, as you would say. So next up coming here, let's assume a name. So this name can be anything. Okay, it can be anything. It can be a letter, it can be a word, but it has to follow the Python rules. Just it cannot start by special character or number. So in this case, I'm just going to name it root, just to make it easier, since it also sounds a bit better too. And then you're going to main loop this thing. So we're going to type root.main loop. So this thing can be anything. You can also name it as Python. We're going to change this, but so that could be anything. But for now, for this video, we're going to leave this to root. Okay. So what these do is, so this root thing the root equals tk line initializes your app GUI. So that's an important part. You cannot skip that, and the main loop basically runs the program and prevents it from stopping until and unless you hit the cross button, which causes the exit command, which is a default thing in the tk enter package. Alright, so moving on, what we can do next is set a size for our window. So what we're going to do is root dot geometry, and let's assume I want a 300 by 300 sized window. So I'm going to put a 300 x 300 inside double quotation marks. So if you don't actually put the double quotation marks, it's not going to count it as a sized variable, a sized value. So you have to put in double quotation marks, and these numbers can be anything as long as they fit in your script. So if you're going to make it really huge, you're going to have a problem. Moving on, so the next thing that I would really want to do is add a title. Now the root.geometry and the root.title paths are clearly optional. I mean, you do need to set a geometry size, but if you want the default, which is really small and basically has no window space or viewing space, so that's that. So let's assume we want our root.title to be let's say Python test app series. So that's going to be my app's name. Okay, so now if I actually run this, and there we have it, I actually have the test app series and app. Now I can resize this to a 500 and do that, and that gives you an equivalent value. Now these basically work like any other app. We can close that. Now I'm gonna set a default value of 300 by 300. Now this episode, this tutorial number 1, basically covers the very let's say basics of developing the Windows app using Python. So we won't really be covering up much in this tutorial, but there's going to be more parts of this thing coming up, so you really need to subscribe. Alright, so moving on. Next thing that I would actually want in every app is some sort of a text, right? So if let's say I want a text on my app, which is an obvious thing. So considering what kind of text would I want, let's just say I want this very text. All right, I want to print Python test series app, right? So the default way of printing something in Python is this. Now what happens if I actually press run? We notice nothing's printed over here, but it actually gets printed in my console, right? So that how we're going to print something in our app. So what we're going to do is add a label. So I'm going to name this as label. Let's actually call it label test equals label. Alright, so inside the label the thing label, there's actually a syntax. So we're going to start off with the window in which you want it. So if you didn't know, using tk-enter you can add multiple windows inside a window app. So I'm going to add root since I want this label to be printed in my root, right? And then the main part is what text should my label have. So here's what my text is going to be, and I can add many more characteristics to this, such as a foreground color, a background color, font, the size of the font, and many more. But that we will be covering up in the upcoming tutorials. So the next thing I want to do is kind of print it, right? So I have this label, right? I'm going to read on my app, and I am up with here, but we notice the text isn't actually printed here. Now why is that? Alright, so TK Hinter has a thing where you need to give a location where you want to place your label or anything else, such as an entry box or a button. So how am I going to do that? Now TK Hinter has 3+ methods to actually place these. So the first and the default thing would be dot back, right? So you could as well put in the next line with the label test dot back. So what does a back do is it basically aligns it to the topmost center aligned part of your app. So if I'm actually going to run it, you notice it's over here, and if I resize my app, my text also moves along with it. The second part of this thing would be, alright, so the second part of it would be the dot place. So you can actually place it, and then you need to give your x and y values. So my x, let's say it's 10, my y is equal to 100, and if I run it, we notice here's my app and the text has been replaced. If I actually resize my app, we notice the text doesn't move. That means it's actually glued to that one position. But if I move this, you notice it moves. That's because this are the coordinates, the x and y values that I've actually entered over here. So that's then third part of it we'll be covering up in later videos, since we don't really need it for now. So for now, for the time being, we're just going to leave it in dot back. Right, so coming up to the next part, the next thing we can have is button. So I'm going to leave it to button underscore test equals a button. Now notice how these start with capital letters, and I just missed a D there. So it starts with the capital letter. Now over here also we wanted to know, so all these syntaxes are really same. You can also have the label and the button is basically same. It's just the word difference. So the next thing is test, and I'm gonna give it the text over there is click here, and the same thing applies the dot back and place. So we're just gonna back it for now, and when I do this, we notice there's a button, and we can actually click it, though it does nothing because we have to define the kind of command we want the button to do, and we will be covering those all of these up in upcoming videos, so you need to subscribe. So next thing is an entry. So what is an entry? Right, let me just finish it up. Entry test equals entry, and I'm just gonna have root. Now this thing can also have a width, a length, and a padding. So we will be covering up 90% of the things in upcoming tutorials. This is just a very on top basic. So what is an entry test? So in every app there's at least one text box where you can actually enter your text, and then you submit. Yeah, you submit it, you search things by putting stuff in the entry box, right, in the text box. So the entry is basically something which takes an input from the user, and the value can be stored in a different variable which you can actually use in other apps. So if I'm actually going to run my program, we notice that is no entry line. That's because we haven't done it. So the same thing applies here. We're going to back it, and we're going to run it, and we have an entry test where we can actually type. And that's pretty cool. Now this app, what happens if I actually resize the app? For now we have it tagged, so I'm gonna add a 500 by 400 and hit enter. There we have it. The thing actually moves around, and if you change the x and y values, no matter what you resize, the text will be in the same position. Now we will be covering up 90% of the things that I said in the upcoming tutorials, so you really need to make sure you're subscribed and turn on your post notification things and everything, and also like this video to boost the YouTube algorithm so people actually find this video and they find more helpful stuff like you did. And also, according to YouTube, as I said earlier, out of 3,000 people who've actually watched my videos, only 60 people of you guys have actually subscribed. So it would really mean the world to me if you could subscribe. But anyways, thank you for watching the video till here, and I'll see you in the next tutorials. Goodbye.